Next exercise, exercise A08, we can consider it as refactoring as well. It will be focused on taking the previously developed code and trying to write it differently. Instead of using a OR logical operator, we want absolutely to use the AND operator in this first condition that allows us to detect whether or not our input has some problem, okay, whether or not the choice made by the user was within the range 1 to 4. So let's have a look at the code to start off with. This is a conditional statement that we are going to modify. This one here. Our current statement reads if choice lesser than 1 strict or choice greater than 4 strict, then we have a problem. And we want to modify this by something using a AND logical operator. So I start by making this modification simply. Just replace the OR by AND. What does it mean now? What's happening? Well, let me iconify this window. I'm going to click done for now. Of course, the code is not correct and finished, but I'm going to iconify this window, iconify also the exercise, and we're going to think about a little what we are doing. So far, what we have is we had the following test, okay? If choice, which I'm going to abbreviate as C, is lesser strict than 1, or choice is greater strict than 4, then we have a problem. Okay, indeed, if choice lesser strict than 1 is true and the other is false or even true, this logical equation result in true. Okay, on the other hand, if C is not lesser than 1 and C is not greater than 4, then typically, yeah, nothing is wrong. It's between 1 and 4 inclusive range. Okay, last case I didn't consider. I have true, false. I have true, true, false, false. What about false and true? Well, yeah, that leads to true. Okay, my number typically would be equal to 5 here. Okay, if I take an example, that would be 5 in this case. For the first case, C lesser than 1 is true, so for example, choice would be 0. For this case, both of them are true. Well, this case is actually impossible, okay? Because if you find a way to input a single value of choice which is at the same time lesser than 1 and greater than 4, well, chances are that you are working in a parallel dimension, which physics law and logic law are unfamiliar to me. So I cannot help you much with this, okay? But you can see here that in all of the other cases, which are possible cases, for example 0, 5, and for this one, C is not lesser strict than 1, C is not greater strict than 4, C could be equal to 3. In all those other cases, we have like detected appropriately what is actually in range and what is not in range. In this case, there is a problem, therefore the expression is true. In this case, there is a problem, it's true. In this case, there is no problem, the expression is false. The user gave us a number between 1 and 4 inclusive. So this is how our Boolean expression worked. Now we want to obtain the same effect. It's important that you understand that we still want to keep the same meaning to our program, but we want to use the AND logical operator. So, little reminder, the truth table of AND is as follows. True and true leads to true. True and false leads to false. Of course, false and true will lead to false as well. And finally, false and false will lead to false. Now, since we switch the OR operator into an AND operator, we need to modify our operands of our Boolean expression. If we just keep, C lesser than 1 and C greater than 4, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Okay, C lesser than 1 is true, C greater than 4 is true. Well, we know already that this particular example is flawed. Okay, so I'm just going to remove it so that we don't bother anymore with it. This is the same one that I used here. So I'm going to remove this because it can never happen. However, C lesser than 1 is true and C greater than 4 is false. This happens, for example, when C is equal to 0, as we saw above. Okay? Well, if I have C lesser than 1 true, C greater than 4 false, what is the logic of the AND operator? The logic of the AND operator is to return false. So that would mean that just switching OR to AND means that my Boolean expression will return false when I have a number out of range. Let's go further. C lesser than 1 is false. C greater than 4 is true. This happens, for example, when we have 5 as value for C, for choice. So when I have 5, once again, my Boolean expression returns false. So right now I could say, well, okay, instead of telling me true when the value is out of range, it seems that this new version tells me false when the value is out of range. Let's look further. When both of these are false, which means typically C is actually in the right interval, the value of choice is in the right interval, 3 for instance, well, this still returns to me false. And this is not acceptable because I have here a Boolean expression which is going to return false in all the 3 cases that interest me. Okay? The only thing it would be good at is actually telling me, well, you are in this weird case with C at the same time lesser than 1 and greater than 4, which is impossible. But that's of little practical interest. So I need to think again how I can modify this expression so that I obtain what I want. So I'm going to state back again this case here that didn't make sense so far. And I'm going to think the only combination of truth value for the 2 operands that leads to a true is true and true. When both operands are true, this whole expression will be true. And I would like it to indicate that, well, I'm out of my validity interval. I'm out of the range of value that I'm willing to accept. So to obtain this, I need to change how those 2 operands read. Instead of considering whether C is strict lesser than 1 and C is strict greater than 4, I'm going to consider and make a wild guess here what would happen if I do the other way around. If C greater or equal to 1 and C lesser or equal to 4, then if both of them are true, this expression leads to true. What does it mean in this context? Well, it means that I am within range. So this is a good case. In all the other cases, if C is greater or equal than 1, there we go. But C is not lesser or equal than 4, what does it mean? Well, I'm going to erase those old example here and rebuild new ones. That would mean typically choice is, for example, the number 5. If C is not greater or equal than 1, but it's actually lesser than 4, that could be C equal 0. What about if it's not greater or equal than 1 and lesser or equal than 4? Well, that could be, actually that could be anything. Okay, that could be like, for example, -1. So I have, just by playing around with this Boolean expression, I have an intuitive understanding that if I rewrite it with AND and I change actually the sign of the comparison in both operands, I'm obtaining an expression that is true when the data is appropriate, and that is false when the data is not appropriate. Now let's go back to our code and see how we can use that. So first thing, I'm going to go back to my condition here, double click, and I'm going to rewrite it as I did. So greater or equal here, lesser or equal here. And I know that so far, when this is true, it means I have a valid data for the variable choice. The user inputted actually something valid. So this doesn't fit with my code correctly, because when this is true, I'm going to go and display an error message. So let's swap this around. I'm going to put my error message. Oops, I dragged the whole thing here, so this is not going to be really helpful. Let me see if I can do a undo real quick here. No, apparently I can't. This is going to be annoying. Let me reopen this code. I certainly do not want to save it. And I'm going to reopen the code as I saved it before to start this exercise. Okay. Sorry about that, a little glitch with Raptor. I'm going to redo this manipulation. I'm taking just this output statement, dragging it here. This is the result. And then I will take each of those 4 conditional statements. And I'm getting brave here. I'm trying to select multiple statements at the same time. I will move them to this part of the conditional. Okay, there we go. This is the result. I just inverted the else and then branch of this conditional statement, and we are done. If the choice is actually, and let me go back and modify since I had to reload this program, if the choice is actually greater or equal to 1, and the choice is lesser or equal than 4, little typo here. Well, if I am between 1 and 4 inclusive, then I keep testing for 1, 2, 3, 4 and do the appropriate work each time. If I am not between 1 and 4, then I display little error message. Once again, I will let you evaluate this according to the test harness that we already developed.